fellow preppers. I'm in the middle of processing some chicory root. I've had it soaking for quite a while to get all the dirt off of it. You need to scrub it a little bit more than lightly to get the dirt off. It's very stuck on. And I believe I still have some on here. But what I'm going to do is go ahead and cut it. And when it's a little bit smaller and easier to handle, I'm going to get a dish towel in just a second and rub it back and forth, kind of like you're drying off a little kid taking him out of the tub or a puppy, and get this last little bit off while it's wet and the water is absorbing it while it's laying here while I cut. It should come off kind of like those gloves you've seen advertised on TV where you're supposed to be able to go back and forth like that and rub the skin off of a potato. Don't know how well they work, but it's the same kind of process. So I'm cutting the root off just before the crown. The crown is where the root splits into the stems. So first, it's kind of sinewy, whether it's fresh or it sits out overnight like this did to dry a little bit, as it soak it and then let it dry. Now I'm not going to pitch the rest of this plant. I'm going to use it. I'm just not going to use it for this process. So you're going to cut it off. This one broke, but I'm still not going to waste that little bit of chicory root. Move these out of the road. And if they're broken little bits, that's fine. That just means you're not losing any nutrient value. You're just going to have less cutting to do. And this one is rather complicated. You have lots of roots that come out looking similar to this. They're kind of gnarled a bit in different directions. So what you'll need to do is carefully, so you're not cutting through this little nubbin and cutting into the main part of the root, you're going to cut on the crown even a little lower than what you might normally do to make sure you get it cut away. And you're going to work your way around. You want to free this root nubbin here so that after you've gotten all of the plant material, the stems off of it, you can go ahead and work on chopping it into smaller pieces. Otherwise, you'd be losing a lot of the root if you just started chopping into it and you had these nubbins on here that you would probably end up losing entirely. Oh, got another little one in there that I didn't even know I had. Because you might cut them too small when you cut them away from the root, or have a little bit left on the plant and thinking you just have all plant stem and throw away a good part of your root. This one gets really narrow up in here. It has some root problems. See how that's kind of separated? And if you could feel it, it feels kind of like driftwood. So it's a little bad part of the root. It may have gotten waterlogged. So you find the bad part, you just simply cut it off, cast it aside. Now we have all of our roots cut free, and now we can work on this big gnarled one. I can pull it apart where they've soaked. They're a little bit easier to work with. Some people's opinion on that is different than mine. They think when they're really hard, they're easier to cut because you don't have them so sinewy, but sometimes they get so hard, and the drought that we've had recently, they were very hard. It makes them more difficult to cut. This still has some bad spot up here. Not much, but a little bit. So I'm going to cut it off. You can investigate the root much more thoroughly if you got a big one like that when you're breaking it up. You don't want anything with mildew or disease. So these are separated now. I only dug out a few. Normally I wouldn't go ahead and make anything with just this few unless it was a situation where you needed it to treat something medicinally right now and you could not call a doctor or go to the emergency room or have modern medicine to use. But I dug up what I could yesterday. Pulled up, actually more accurate, it was so dry. It has since rained. We are alternating between flooding and drought. It's been a weird weather year. Not at all good for our gardens. So these pieces I'm spreading out here on my tray, and they're relatively the same size. I have several bigger ones. You want them to dry uniformly, just as if you were putting them in a dehydrator, which you could do if you have an urban nut setting and put them in your dehydrator. I'm going to go ahead and dry them in my oven. It takes about 5 to 7 hours depending on how thick the roots are, how wet the roots are, and how many of them there are. You do want them as uniform as possible. You can't do anything about the diameter, but you can get the shapes pretty close in size. You may have some little thin ones like this that dry up more quickly. Not too much of a problem. They can splinter, and you don't want to lose all your little pieces, so you might want to check them just as you would do anything else that you're cooking or baking. Think of it like a steak. Some might get done more quickly than the others, so it's okay if you pull out some that were thinner that you didn't want to pitch and just set them aside till they come out. So I set the oven on 170 degrees. That is as low as my oven goes. I'm going to put them in here in the oven, and I'm going to let them go ahead and get dried out. 5 to 7 is a guideline that can change depending on your roots. As I noted, on your oven, on the temperature and humidity outside in your kitchen. So it could take 4 hours. It could take 8. You can make sure they are thoroughly dried, and I will shoot another video when they're dried. And when they are thoroughly dried, they are not going to be pliable like this at all. And once they're dried, you can powder them up. You can put them in a mason jar or a shop vac bag and save them in this intact state if you want to do that. Powdering them up saves a lot of space when you're stockpiling. It makes them a lot more portable. You can even put them in gel caps if you wanted to, then open the gel cap. If you're a gel pack maker like I do, a gel pill maker like I do, and that's one way to preserve them. And you can just open it up and put in your coffee, your tea, or just throw the whole gel cap in. That won't hurt anything. And put them in jars, and you will have them ready and portable. Be great to have in your bug out bag. And the more you powder things and prepackage them in a dosage size, that's why I like using those gel caplets, then you can have your own little apothecary on the go. It'll save time with trying to measure things out. Perhaps the time when you can't, because of circumstances you're in, or because it's dark, you've lost a tool, you're the injured one trying to tend to yourself. And if you have them prepackaged in the appropriate size that you need for a dosage, marked either child or adult, if you're not conscious, you're no longer with the group, or you're one of the ones who perished early on, your loved ones who might not be as adept at being an herbalist as you are will be able to go ahead and continue on and use your remedies.